So today we all are very lucky that Professor Vikram Bhatt has agreed to talk to us and talk to us about his journey for all these years. And he'll take us through some of his interesting works that he has done recently with the Northern Quebec communities. So I request you all to please rename yourself on Zoom, like put your first name, last name, and there your discipline in a batch. So batch in which you entered any discipline except, and you may want to introduce yourself in the chat. You may want to put your name, where you are, what you do, what is the company, and you may want to talk about your title as well, if useful. We also request everybody to please keep yourself muted unless you are asking a question. And we also request you to please type your question in the chat box so that we can request you to unmute for the question towards the second half of it. So most of you know that we have in June 2020, with help from many of you, we launched CEPT Alumni Association of Americas, and we have a website. Many people ask us about some basic information, so we thought of giving this basic information standard in all events, so that we keep on inviting new people for registering to CEPT Alumni Association of Americas as well, if they have not done so far. So this is the website. Please feel free to go to the website, look at past events, get registered, and so on and so forth. Ultimately, our interest is to really network, connect CEPT alumni here in Americas, and our interest is to really promote collaboration professionally as well as socially. And I think so many of you are here who have helped so many of us. You were in early 60s batches, you came here early, and many of you helped us as newcomers coming to United States. You helped us out throughout the process, and we would want to continue many of the ways in which you all helped us, and find out new ways to help newcomers like Abhinaya. Thank you for being here. Many like you, we can potentially help in many different ways. So our ultimate interest is to really talk about CEPT alumni in the Americas. And I think that is our ultimate goal. Nonetheless, if at all we have the ties back with school, and if at all we can help school in many different ways, professionally, academically, and potentially in terms of some kind of knowledge sharing or donation sharing or something of that sort. So I think our interest is to bring together various platforms. So many of the people have asked us many times about knowing more about CEPT alumni in the Americas. So if at all you want to know about them professionally, then please join our LinkedIn group. And if at all you want to know more about them socially, then please join via Facebook. And obviously we use WhatsApp to really communicate simple, many different discussions going on, and keep an informal chat there as well. So I think our interest is to bring many of us together, and since we transcend a lot of time horizons, we would want to really find out ways in which we can help each other network, obviously through events, but also at the same time career guidance, as well as social networks and social help. At the same time, we can share knowledge with each other, as well as our alma mater back and students there, and potentially with some money as well. We have in the recent past lost many of our friends, as well as some of the very close family members to COVID in recent past. At least we thought to really honor them with silence for 1 minute, if at all we can. Please do that just for 1 minute, and I will ping you as that minute is done. Thank you. Thank you once again for helping us commemorate our fellow Septians whom we lost recently. With that, let me hand it over to Kirit Desai, who is from Faculty of Architecture, 1963 batch, and he would like to introduce Professor Vikram Bhatt, and he would also moderate today's discussion. So, Kirit Bhai.
Okay. Thank you, Vatsal. I think somebody requested Vatsal before I start that too. If you know the name of the people, those who have we recently lost. So I think Jinraj has asked that request. So if you know, you can mention it or you can do it at the later end of the presentation.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah, I think some of them we put it on our, at least on a WhatsApp group, and some of the other we have mentioned it, Jinraj. So we kind of mention their name and then pay their respect on our platforms that we have it. So, but I think it'd be a good idea to kind of collect the names and the list of them, so we can do that. Well, with that, thank you, Vatsal, for kind of introducing the organizations and giving the overview of it. But I'm really honored to introduce Professor Vikram Bhatt, sort of fellow alumni. And it was, I think, 2 years behind me. I'm 63 batch, 65, and kind of remember him very well. And then later on met him a few times here in Canada, and then SA'50 in Ahmedabad, and then talked on phone and other stuff. But Vikram doesn't need much of introduction, particularly people, those who are in academics and in field of sort of teaching and architecture. And he's a very outstanding alumni from the School of Architecture. Now it's CEPT. He's a professor emeritus at the McGill University, and of course, fellow of Royal Architectural Institute of Canada, a fellow of Royal Society of Canada, and he has studied architecture at the School of Architecture, Center of Environmental Planning and Technology, Ahmedabad, and then graduated 72 did a master's in architecture at McGill University, 75, and he's the director of very numerous, very successful international collaborations and research projects in places like China, India, Mexico. He has written and lectured widely in a subject of human settlements in developing countries. In addition, he's also interested in studying how the different cultures have addressed the problems of shelter in their respective environments. He has contributed articles to important references, books such as Encyclopedia of 20th Century Architecture and Time Saver Standards for Urban Design. He has numerous awards over the 40 years of his 40 plus years of career, and been listed here on his AD Research Award, Graham Foundation for Arts Fellowship, and Design Awards, and he's has a really monumental work in minimum cost housing, which is a kind of, he's been doing it for a long time, and also some of the things that is very outstanding about Vikram is that before anybody knew about this green building and green things that now it's a buzzword, Vikram was doing it way before anybody came about it, and his outstanding work in green or audible landscape. He's doing it things of a roof, using the roof as a roof gardens and things before. Leads have started giving a credit and integrating into their concept. So I think Vikram is ahead of his time in many, many ways. And we are very, very sort of proud of his contribution to the field of sustainable and green architecture. Also, he has done a very, very early on his kind of books that I remember reading it and looking at it is the results of the Raj and the after the masters. He's kind of one of the first Indian architect to really work on a subject that was really very unique to India. And I think hopefully we'll talk about it. But about going back to the green things, his blueprint for a hack is a really very interesting subjects and his recent book. Without much kind of going over it and babbling about it, would turn over to Vikram to kind of tell us his life journey and tell us about his interesting projects that he has been working on for all these years. So here to Vikram.
Thank you very much, Kirit Bhai, for embarrassingly warm introduction. It's middle of May. Today in Ahmedabad, it's about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. I ended up living in Canada because I wanted to do graduate studies in North America. Little did I know what the climate is going to be like and what challenges it poses and so on. So what do you expect me to talk about? But my encounters, of course, with this great and at the same time very rewarding journey I had in Canada, which is my home. Just now I'm emeritus retired. So the climate is very challenging. So at present, I have to come clean. I have escaped to the warmer climes of Florida, but we'll be heading back in a few days back to Montreal. And that's and with the internet and other things, I am able to continue working at long distances. And fortunately, this was possible even before the closures of Zoom and other things. So that's what I thought would be a good way to share. Kirit Bhai mentioned my work in the green and others. So I will very quickly take you through some of these experiences of mine and what I did and why I ended up in Canada when I did, and then show you the most recent project that I just finished and the book that has come out on it. I will just share my screen with Can you see it now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
So, but before I get to the main subject of today's presentation, reassembling the North and the blueprint for a hack, I should, in 1971-72, we were finishing our studies. I was working in Balakrishna Doshi's office, and we were finishing our final studios, which in passing, Jinraj and I, just before we started, talked about. It was around the same time a brand new program was launched at McGill University in Montreal by a gentleman named Alvaro Ortega, a Colombian gentleman who had studied at the Beaux-Arts, who had worked because of the Second War, he had to leave Paris and come and studied at McGill, and then had gone on to work with Grotius and studied with him, and then taught at Harvard. And he had also worked for the United Nations for the longest time. And he had worked on the challenges of housing around the globe with a group at the United Nations, which was known as the UN Center for Housing, Building and Planning. It was a very small unit of the United Nations. They were just getting involved in those issues. There were other housing programs at that moment in time in North America. Caminos was running a special program at MIT. So CEPT students were very fortunate that we had a little sense of what was going on around the globe. And this is even before the internet. So because of the connections we were fortunately provided, we had that access. So I knew what was being taught at MIT, but I was also working with Balakrishna Doshi's office at that moment in time. I was working directly with Doshi, and I was very fortunate. I was given a project to redraw each and every housing project that Doshi had designed, from GSFC to IFCO to all the acronyms you can imagine. So I knew inside out all the housing projects that Balakrishna Doshi had done. And that was a great hands-on learning experience. And some of these drawings you can also see continue to be reproduced in some of his publications. But it was just drawing and redrawing and working with him and learning about these gave me great insight about this densities and housing. What Caminos used to teach was when you did your thesis with Caminos, you will be sent back to your native country and you will survey 15 or 20 housing projects and analyze them in terms of their layouts, in densities, public spaces, and so on. I said, but I have done half of it at least here. So this was a new, interesting program at McGill, and they were doing very exciting work related to some other things. And I thought it may be a worthwhile thing to consider. And in '72, even before I joined, they had built this great project. And this was an article written in the AD and others. And what they had put forward was a house, a modest house for very poor people in very poor communities in the world. And the challenges that they faced in poor countries around the globe, they say, are related to infrastructure, services, such as water, sanitation, energy. Because if you imagine living in the slums, you may not have water supply. So what they tried to create was a harvesting of the water, wind turbines, solar energy for cooking, distillation of the water, and so on. And even before the idea of autonomy, or as Kirit mentioned, a kind of green architecture, they were trying to experiment with these things. And I was fortunate enough to be accepted in the program, and I joined them. And what the initial experimental projects were done, I could participate in the process in codifying those things, in continuing the research related to stop the 5-gallon flush. People don't have enough water. And we have flush toilets everywhere. You flush down and you are using more than 150 liters of water every day per capita. What do you do? How do you create situations where you can recover and recycle things? And for my thesis, we built a house. So that was a great kind of hands-on design build kind of experience, which I got right at the beginning when I joined the program. Moving on, we could start doing other experiments which were related to bringing that very specific idea of the ECOL house to Canada. The ECOL house itself was visited by Bucky Fuller. And Bucky Fuller, when he saw this, said, oh, this is environment, common sense, and building all combined together. We should call it ECOL house. We didn't have that name then, but we were able to codify it that way. And we developed another ECOL house for the Canadian climate and also experimented on other areas of using the rooftop waste length and growing things. But growing things was even before energy, trying to also address problems of harvest. In Canada, our growing seasons are extremely small. So growing things in greenhouses, capturing the energy from the chimney and recycling it into cold frames and so on. And how these experiments can be carried through in terms of other service areas related to water, recycling, conservation of water, and so on. At that time, Doshi came by, and Doshi said, Doshi knew Alvaro Ortega, I didn't know for the longest time. When Doshi came to Harvard on Graham Foundation Fellowship, Alvaro was teaching there, and they had met, and their paths had crossed, and then it became very. So Doshi says, why don't you come and participate on some of these things at our foundation in Ahmedabad at Vastushilpa? Until then, most of our work was driven by technological things, what I would call appropriate technologies, trying to solve problems by creating or making widgets in the crudest sense. Going and addressing the problems of slums of India, which Alvaro and my other colleague Vitor Grinjiski and others were trying to do, I said, we can really address this heads-on is only by engaging in the social milieu of these places. We were supposed to start working at that moment in time in slums of Ahmedabad. When I arrived, there was an epidemic in Ahmedabad of jaundice. We couldn't work in the slums of Ahmedabad. Doshi and others, and everybody was really concerned about the health and welfare of researchers working with me and myself. So he said, why don't we do things in Madhya Pradesh, in Indore? And at that moment in time, Doshi's office landed the project of Aranya. And Doshi made a deliberate decision with Stein and Balla, and they both partners agreed, and all three of them said, we should put this very large, that was the largest housing project that Doshi's office ever got, into Vastushilpa Foundations for research. So we could really think about how best we could address this. So the work which we did in how the other half builds related to everything, coincidentally, which was starting to happen as a kind of other partnership, immediately fit hand in glove with this particular project that Balkrishna Doshi's office was working. And then our work continued to expand into China and other places. Incidentally, just now as we speak, there is an exhibition on at the Bauhaus. Bauhaus Lab is a very special event that's run yearly. About 8 to 10 scholars from around the world are allowed to come work under the supervision of one professor there. And they identify an object and a theme, or a theme and an object. And they unpacked these ideas around it. The first object and the theme at the first Bauhaus lab was refugees. And the object was Walter Gropius's desk. And going forward, there was another one with the furniture designed by Marcel Breuer, and then connectors which were developed in the United States after Gropius came. And this is the first time ever that they have gone outside this circuit of Bauhaus and identified the blocks that we had developed early on for the Ecole house and the house that I built for my thesis and so on, as well as the other half works which we had done. And that show is still on. So that is quite interesting to see. And then our work expanded into other areas in urban-rural fringe of China, and then in Mexico. And after the earthquake in Bhuj and Ahmedabad, we again worked with Balkrishna Doshi's office and worked with some of the groups. And then the food production on the roofs, which we are working on, has taken a very different dimension in urban greening around the globe. And I have worked on a global project from Sri Lanka to Argentina to Uganda, Montreal, and across Canada. And that has taken its own life. But at the same time, I have also been engaged in poor areas around the globe. Poverty still exists amongst us in North America. So the challenge of housing, challenge of shelter, challenge of human settlements in our own backyard is also enormous. So we have worked with communities in northern Quebec. We have worked previously in other areas. And what I'm going to talk about today is the most recent project, which was an urban design award-winning project in Kujavat Hackathon. When I was young, I was taught, this is how I learned geography. India was at the center of everything. When I moved to North America, North America was not on the center, but it is off center because this is where I was based. But if you really look at Canada and the Northern Hemisphere, if we were to look at it, we seldom look at the North in this manner. But as a Canadian, I very much understand what the North is. What you can see here is a very large area. This includes Alaska, but which is kind of closely related to the North. And there you have the Canadian North. And this is the Great Bear, the Russian, and then these are the Europeans. And this is Greenland. The climate here in these areas is moderated quite a bit by the Gulf Stream, whereas the Canadian North is perhaps, even though this is is much, much colder. Today in Ahmedabad, the temperature is about 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 39 degrees. In the places where we are working just now, today the temperature would be about 38, 39 degrees Fahrenheit. So you understand the expanse of this area. However, this is nothing compared to what weather is like there in the winter. From December, January, February, 3 months, the average temperature would be minus 20 degrees. In midsummer, the temperature would rise up to about 50 degrees. So this is the expanse of the Canadian North that we are dealing with. I have worked all the way up north there, and more recently, my effort has been in this northern part of province of Quebec. The climate, as I say, moderates a lot of things, but at the same time, it's of the greatest beauty. If you go there, you look at, and if you find time and have an eye, you suddenly see these are rock outcrops in the tundras where there is hardly any vegetation. But when you look at these rock outcrops, you find amazingly beautiful microorganisms growing, mosses growing, and life thrives on them. And the other life survives and exists because reindeers eat all these mosses and others. There are other creatures which come around and they are used for that. And the clarity of the space. And this is midsummer photograph of the place. It's so pure, so tranquil, so stunningly beautiful. And the power of the nature just doesn't, it's overwhelmingly beautiful. That's all I could say. The colors changes, the spaces are occupied. And it also makes you aware how insignificant we are and how important our role is in protecting this, even though we are so feeble. And that becomes very clear when you say how these things are changing so very rapidly. These are the areas which are of permafrost region, and you see big boulders of ice, floats have broken, and then just crumbles. But the most stunning beauty of it, and this is what is the place. And this place is inhabited for thousands of years by Inuits all around the polar region. Very few, very sparsely populated, but people have been there and they have been nomadic people. For the longest time, until the end of the Second War, they were not sedentarized. Before the white men and the trading posts, which started regularizing this, they lived in episodic residences. Seasonally, they would build tents and teepees, and in wintertime, they will build these igloos. There is hardly any material. Their ingenuity, their ability to do things with whatever they have at hand is what makes them so successful. Or they have survived. When the war comes to an end, somebody was saying, they will be the ones who will still be there. I don't want to be that pessimistic and fatalistic, but their resourcefulness is quite very amazing. They are the ones who invented igloo, for example, from ice, wind-packed ice, and create their beautiful structures. They are the ones who invented kayaks. They are the ones who invented harpoons using things. And that is what it is. But all that came to a stop and end after the Second War. These people were sedentarized. With the social welfare state, with the Cold War, it was important for the North American powers to decide that they all be settled in these northern boundaries so that they would be able to protect us as a kind of tripwire if the Russian attack comes, or it was easier to bring to them the social services and so on, but it is not easy. So today, populations live in settlements like these. But these settlements are very much a product of the Southern thinking. This is the other settlement you see. And as we started addressing the housing challenges, oh, these people are living in igloos and these people are living in tents and teepees. So the initial kind of housing which was built and sent up there was really very modest, very basic, which is totally unlivable. These were called chicken coops, and they are like chicken coops. And you can see what conditions they are in. So the constant struggle has been to try to maintain and upgrade the quality of these houses, to insulate, to improve. And it is not easy to build this housing also. We are building on permafrost. So here you have the entire structure, which is kept on very solid rocky grounds or on gravel base, and then balanced onto these jacks, and then the entire structure is built on this. There is hardly any building material, as you can see in Kujua, on the borderline of trees. This is the biggest spruce you will get, black spruce. There is no wood, there is no other material. So everything gets shipped up to these locations. And this is how the housing is conceived, sent up, and built. Technical challenges are enormous. We have to build these housing on permafrost, as I mentioned, but you cannot have piped water supply or sanitation. Everything freezes. So you have to have a special kind of sanitation, heating, and water supply system. So what you see here, these are the supply and exit sources. Trucks deliver water, trucks empty out this waste that is transferred to. So the formal authorities are working very hard to address the basic housing challenges. But at the same time, the sustainable housing and community planning in the Arctic is also challenged by the climate change, rapid urbanization or sedentarization, and explosion of population. It's a very young population. In southern Canada, we have hardly 15% population of young people of the 100 total. In the north, which is below the age of 14, here we have 35% population. So it's exploding. They have expectations, they have their own dreams. Residents have their own way of living, their own well-being that needs to be addressed, and so on. So the cultural and social infrastructure of these places needs to be adapted to not only the climate and environment, but the conditions of the north and their lifestyle and traditions. So as a consortium, multi-university, multi-practicing office consortium, we have been working for a few years, working very closely with the community to try to address these challenges. And so here we are in one of the communities, the main community of Northern Quebec. And where we are working, as I mentioned, is in Quebec, in the region called Nunavik and the North Shore, with two communities, Inuit and Innu, the indigenous communities of Quebec. The orange area which you see here, imagine what is the size of it. Any guess? Everybody is on the mute, I know.
I'm guessing the size of Uttar Pradesh.
The whole of Quebec is about 1/3 size of Canada, a little less. And Nunavik up there is about this, it's bigger than Spain. So you are not far off, but little under. And in this area, we have population of only 15,000 people. So to reach to these people, to work with these people, and in this entire orange region, which you have, because of the permafrost and distances, there is no road. It's impossible to have road network. Luckily, with the sedentarization, each and every community is connected with an airstrip, so one can fly there. But the traffic is extremely thin. So to bring supplies, bring shipments and so on, generally what we have to do is when these areas thaw, the shipments are sent up in boats and they deliver things. So those shipments you saw of the housing, anything, if you want to plan something, you have to plan a year in advance, at least longer. If you missed a nail, you're in trouble. And geographically, if you see, this is the Nunavik region, and this is the tree line, and then this is all tundra. And as we move up, this is really, even those spruces you saw are non-existent. But within this, we have created North American suburbs. But their lifestyle continues. But it's a very different kind of lifestyle now. ATVs in good weather, which is 4 months of the year, or even in the cold weather, they ride around on these, are paramount. You can see they're like small monsters. It's like in a sci-fi, but it is very much a way of life. Then there is another small monster, which is a very different kind of a monster, which are the skidoos. So you can see them everywhere. It's an amazing, so that even though we have created suburbs, you have a space, the urban space, which is so very different in these spaces. How they communicate from one another, how they go and move about in these spaces, ownership and boundary lines, the way we have in suburbs, are not there. So that and the collectivity is extremely strong and important. And now you can see, this is good weather, so you have a parking lot of all the skidoos, old and new. And you do have the other modes of transport, which is really close to their heart. They do not use kayaks these days, they use motorboats. And this is a very telling thing when you think about it. In Nunavik, almost 80% of the Inuit population hunts. Almost 90% fish. And a little less than, more than 85%, they harvest wild plants, berries, and trap animals and fish and so on. I would urge you people to look up mussel hunting in New York Times. A very beautiful article was written. Google it and you will find it. The ingenuity of these populations, you will understand. This is what is their lifestyle. So when you build a suburban home, a carcass of a caribou or a big seal or others is brought in the home. This is how families get together. Survival still in the North, because they are really dependent on each other, is very much based on the traditional ways of living. So there is a constant kind of tension and transition which is taking place in these places. The only way to move forward and resolve it in the most possible way is working closely with this community. And this is what we as a community partners are trying to achieve. And here you can see the transition which is taking place. Instead of sled, now it's a very different kind of sled that they have created. And here you see a very different kind of sled created for musk. So as a part of the consortium, we were meeting in this, one of the biggest places. And at that moment in time, I received an email and that said, Vikram, you are responsible for the Canadian Centre for Architecture, CEPT. It's an annual event organized by 3 schools of architecture and design, Université de Montréal in Montreal, University of Quebec, Montreal, and McGill. And in rotation, 3 schools take leadership role. And the leader sets the theme of the charrette, and then the 3 schools participate in this. And here I am totally removed from McGill and others and say, Vikram, you are responsible. So I reached out to my partners and said, if we really want to involve Southern design community of young people in this place, should we not do the charrette, which is based in this community? And Paul Parson is a former mayor of this town, and he said, let me speak with the colleagues, the native colleagues, and we will receive. And we agreed finally that yes, it would be a wonderful idea to have a charrette related to this. So recomposing the North was the theme I said. And first person I reached out is Suzanne Havelka, one of my former PhD students, and Lisa Kuperkualik. She is an Inuk anthropologist who is part of the consortium working together, and say, we will introduce this charrette to students and say, how can we look at the public realm of housing, which we have created? We've looked at the technical and sheltered parts of things. Can we address this challenge of the public realm in some way? And recompose the North is the idea. I was fortunate enough to get an amazingly diverse jury to agree to participate in this. And Suzanne and I, we worked as facilitator. We were not part of the jury. We set the theme, and Lisa, as an anthropologist, helped introduce them. And as an Inuk, she was the right person to introduce them to the history and how she and her community looks at these challenges. And then these are other partners. Lola Shepard, she's a professor of architecture at Waterloo University. She said, we should open this charrette, if possible, to other schools of architecture. And I prevailed on the CCA, which is the leading research organization in the field of architectural history, in collection of all the archives, library, museum, and so on. So they agreed that's a great idea. Geneviève Vachon, she is the researcher at Laval University in Quebec. Mylène Riva, she is a geographer and a public health expert working with the communities. Rafiko Ruzi, he's a assistant director of research at the CCA. And Tunu Napartuk was at that time the mayor of Kujuak. So instead of 3 schools, we had 10 schools of architecture and design from across Canada participate. It was an amazing response to this challenge. We received the most submission. The young community of designers really stepped up to this amazing challenge. And we had more than 200 participants. And we had a great set of proposals which were chosen as winners. And Tunu came down for the award ceremony, and he looked at all the entries, and he was one of the judges, and he looked at me and said, gee, this is what we do, Vikram. When you initially, or Paul came initially to me, I was not sure what Vikram is saying and what ideas you people have put forward, that we have to make do with whatever we have, and perhaps we can indeed animate our public realm and be proud of doing whatever we're doing, rather than just be afraid of somebody saying, oh, this is the wrong thing to do, and so on. So why don't we do something? What these ideas young designers have put forward. If we are serious, we should take forward to the next stage. So the idea of a charrette moved after the charrette into mounting a real action research where we could build something and show what is possible. I had the backing of the consortium I am part of. We had modest $5,000 fund. Suzanne, PhD candidate, myself, McGill, minimum cost of sure. CCA said, yeah, we will give you all the moral support and logistical, but don't count on monies. Tunu also said, you can count on the municipal support in terms of logistic and infrastructure, but we will have to really do everything shoestring at minimum cost. But it was November. It's really cold. It's just impossible to mount or do something at that moment in time, which was very good. We had some time we could buy. The thinking was very much codified into what our thinking is in our consortium and what is guiding today's development of Inuit communities and northern communities of Cree and other Indians in Quebec and beyond. The concept of being resourceful to solve problems, because we are out there. We have limited resources, we have limited know-how, but we have to be very resourceful to do with what we have. But to move forward, we cannot pull in different directions. Concept of consensus decision-making has to be very important. And to do something so that good number of members or the majority of the community benefits are served from this action, that's critical. Concept of developing collaborative relationship or working together as a common purpose. The concept of environmental stewardship and concept of skills and knowledge acquisition, sharing, and passing it down. And last but not least, showing respect and caring attitude to others. When people consider their relationship to people and because the colonial relationship, which is at the root of many of our relations with the indigenous population, has clouded the decision making and has really created generational hardship from the schools to other challenges where these young people were taken away from the parents and sent to schools and so on. So this is so very important to recognize this and to move forward. This is foundational to the Inuit way of being and being welcoming to others at the same time. So past is past, but we want to maintain the more positive moving forward issue. And this has been the guiding principle. So one of my former students who worked there as a planner shared, she is working with the public consultation with the community, and she was part of my communicating with drawings and sharing information and designing things together, community engagement and so on. So if we were to mount a hack based on the charrette ideas, these principles will have to be there, and the resourcefulness which the people have shown in their own work, in their hunting cabins and so on. And these are the works of Suzanne Welka. This was her doctoral work, looking at how these indigenous communities have resourcefully done things. And you may think, wow, look at that, that's quite very beautiful. But look at it. It really intersects with architecture, with urbanism, with space, with time, and with the geography that they not only live in, occupy, and live on. So the blueprint for the heart is, so we were three. So Tunu and I said, okay, I will identify a coordinator, and he said he will identify a coordinator to move forward. So David, one of my master's students, he has worked in the north, and Ron, who is working with the community there, were identified. Susan moved to Paris. We didn't have, and they don't have very strong internet links anyway. So Skype and phone connections were the only way with the conference calls every week to move forward. First, we reached out to those winning teams and said, folks, are you interested in joining this? They all say, yeah, Vikram, this is a great idea. We would love to do something based on some of the ideas we did. I said, no. Your ideas are there, your talents there. We will have to not do what they, but they understood that what will be done on the ground, where their ideas and creativity would be put to the fullest use, rather than just rehashing what was done for the charrette. We also wanted to expand and reach to the community. So to reach to the school principal, accommodate ourselves in the field and so on, that was a very special challenge. So this sort of expanded group made site selection decisions, accommodations, promotions of the whole activity, awards, I will explain, activities related to how we want to be engaging in the field there, travel, itinerary, and so on. Long distance, through our weekly consultations and so on, we identified 5 locations where perhaps we could mount something which would be of use to the community. And we had sketched out a 1 week, less than a week window where we can, as an interdisciplinary team, come together and mount a hack. But the pre-planning and thinking about it is the most important part of this, or as important part of this as the hack itself. Very important to engage the community. So we have a Facebook page, we have posters all around the community, we have radio announcement in the community. So young, old, everyone in the community knows that there is this. Kujuak is the name of the town where this hackathon is going to be, and we have amazing response. To get there, the remoteness of the place is unreal. It costs $3,000+ to fly up there and back. We didn't have monies. But you can see it's the air in with, it's the indigenous airline. We reached out to the community and we wanted to talk to the president and say, all these southern young designers who are flying up there, they will be treated as Inuits, and we could fly at reduced rates. So we saved 60%, and we had just barely enough money to get there and do something. Staying in hotels was out of the question. But reaching out to the community and mayor and others reaching out and say, we will try to pay them the best we could. Community members say, we have larger families, we will go share our homes. Ourselves, we will go and vacate our home, and you people can live in our home. People vacated homes for us. The school was a very important expansion. The young school kids to participate in this process. So was the town done. So was the planning office and the design office of the town and the community. And the construction. So this became the full team, which is not the full team. The full team is much, much bigger, but you can see how from 3 of us, what it takes to mount the thing. So from the recomposing the knot to the hackathon, things grew. And the ideas which were put forward in the hackathon itself, if you see, were that yes, there is lots of building material, waste, and so on. Perhaps we could do things. Upon arrival, we find is the time, space. I know the space, but the team which arrives there is learning. Time, space, distances, everything is enormous. To move them as a team, a school bus was the only way we could do it affordably. And you can see some very nice. There you see, the graphics is still the same, but they still live in these structures. So it's not that it is something alien. And upon arrival, finally, we chose this site. You realize it's a daunting sight to have something as a place. What was decided to put here was a very special structure. We say, we have this skating rink. Parents come, bring their children to the skating rink. But it's biting cold, as I told you. And kids don't have a place to take off their shoes and put on their skates. And then parents stay there and keep their motors running to stay warm and so on. We need a protection where kids could just sit down and do things and so on. So we need a shelter here. At the same time, in good weather, they have baseball diamonds. So can we create a dugout and do something? So this was and behind in the blue structure you see is the town workshop. So this was a good location to use these resources all together and mount something quickly. So this was a good location, and where the team is standing, the part of the team behind is the town center. We had gone there with a trays full of donuts and the town, so we are just setting it up for the evening town meeting, and this was a great icebreaker. And going to the school and spending the day with young kids, and they knew about these things already with the teachers, with the announcement, the pre-announcements, and so on. And then working with them, with the ideas, what sort of structures they would like to have, how they would, and in the evening, with the main design team from the planning office till the last moment working. And the former mayor is there and others. On the arrival on the dump, you realize it's same daunting situation. You look at the expanse and the mountains of the legacy waste which is sitting there. Yes. It's all classified too. You have to see what stuff is where, and you see all kinds of paints are there, but they're all mixed and then put together so they can somehow be recycled. There are drums which are not easy to, mountains of dryers. That is, and we sorted through all these stuff and chose big objects. So here is a huge culvert being retrieved and brought to the side. And here you see the baseball diamond is on the right, the skating ring is on the left. We do have time-lapse photography and film made of this, but we will not go into it. And here we are pulling together all the waste materials. Different parallel activities are going on. And in a woman, she knows how to thread things and weave things, and using just light fixtures and weaving things and making beautiful decorations with those cables and wires. And Steve on the left and Ron on the right. Steve is the manager of the town dump. Without Steve or Ron, we couldn't have done anything. Nobody knew how to write this. I afterwards tried, and it was fun. But I wouldn't say I would know. So the idea was to build this, and what is being done using the culvert, this is a beacon of light, and what you see on the right is cut out tires. Those tires which you see are these. It takes 5 people to roll one of those tires, and this is what we did, using those tires, cutting them, and then making a light beacon. So the idea was to create a place for a search light. So when there is a public event or something with a little motor, you can light up. And then we found a skylight, so which was put on top, and then that would be the skylight. So the final structure that we managed to put was not just this, a little more than that. So here you have a beacon of light. Here you have a platform, a stage. So this is a big field which we are facing. So every Summer they have public music concerts and so on. So this is what was to be used for a while as a stage, and then you have the C-can, which was current size, which is facing on to the other side of the skating rink where parents could sit. And there you can see the recycling of all the treads of skidoos, all the tires, benches, metal frames which we had, the woven things we had, and then raising the flag of the town. And on the other side of the C-can were the bleachers for the diamond. The recycled paint which we got, most of it was all mixed, so the gray military color, but then we added all the colors to different tires and so on. Even before the thing was finished, kids were happy playing, and this is what was produced after the project. The drawing, it was not what we as a typical designer would do. Design was all practically on the ground. So what we have are the bleachers on the side, the C-can and the shelter on this, the stage on that. And then if you go back, you see these are sewage tanks, which were used as a platform onto which boards were put. Tractor tires were used as a foundation because we are working in permafrost. It moves in this. So really, and then fill them with the earth and so on. And you can see it's a very small little insert which goes inside in the public realm. It continued serving for a couple of years. Then it was taken down with the age and so on. And this is the story which is written and explained in much greater detail in the book that has just come out. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all. Yeah, can you? Okay, so.
Yes.
Okay, so we can.
I'm gonna shut the presentation. That's okay?
Yeah.
Thank you, Vikram. Bye. So, Kiriba, you would want to open it up for Q&A?
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting and sort of a quite detailed presentation of all the activities and how do they people up there kind of are creating the things that is pretty different and very interesting. So I think I will kind of start with one question that I have looking over before and now is that how do they how do these whole solutions or the prototype received by the local community and are they kind of creating similar structures in different communities?
As you saw some examples, the housing is not produced that way. That is produced much more formally. But if you look at the extensions that they put up to their homes, many residents have their hunting chalets. So they all salvage things. And the town dump itself, they jokingly call it Home Depot. They don't call it Home Depot. And they call it Canadian Tire. That is the Canadian equivalent of the hardware store. So this is what is their hardware store. And the objective is not to glorify just this recycling as such. The material deficiency or the formal investment in housing is a must. That is not, if you read the final interview with Tunu in the book, he's very clear that this is not a substitute for the needs, but what this really allows us to do is question the engagement of the community and their role in managing and participating in the entire process, not just decision-making process, but building, maintaining, and running of the physical plan of the community structures as well as the residential structure. So that it is, and they are able to do that, but you have to recognize they do not even have formal education. So what do you do? So it is only this long process whereby you initiate the young people to participate in this, teach them about the possibilities and what they are able to do is valorize. That is, I think, very important in this process. And then the people are afraid when they see this and they say, formal authorities, initially they say, the same challenge which we faced also when we say urban agriculture in the initial stages of greening of the cities, mayors and other administrators thought, they're trying to turn my city into a farm. It was never the case, but it was such a naughty title. Urban agriculture, this is a kind of a oxymoron when you think about it. So similarly, this kind of engagement where you say, this is like an adventure playground that you're creating in the middle of the town, it is jarring, but at the same time, what we are putting forward is not an absolute answer, but it is a process whereby you say, yes, we can certainly, as a stopgap or as a progressive measure, or on the other hand, as a global challenge of what do we do with our waste? Think about it in terms of where are we and the amount of waste which we have. Are we going to be just like those nomads that they were, that you hunt, gather, and then move on and build another camp and another camp? If you look at the book, you will see the size of the town, which is growing and growing. So that question becomes so stark in these smaller communities, which we have hidden from our eyes in our daily life. So that is another very serious question that we are trying to put forward here and say, it's not an absolute answer, but certainly should waste be seen as something, as a liability or a resource or a responsibility for the future generation, whereby we say, we will not leave this place dirty and messed up. We clean up after us.
Any other question? Yeah, please. Either you can put it in a chat or you can unmute yourself and ask questions.
It has raised his hand, so Amit, please unmute yourself.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Lakshman bhai.
Yes, Lakshman.
Thank you, Professor Bhatt, for wonderful presentation and sharing all your accomplishments and exciting work that you have done. I had a question from your work on sites and services and slums. There was a great amount of work done back then, and we still see slums in our urban fabric today. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on like what are the new solutions or what are the old solutions that we can bring back to address this challenge of slums across the whole developing world, but more specifically in India, because we have been talking about slum-free cities for a while and not sure where we are going, what we can learn from the past. So I would love to hear your thoughts. Thank you.
it's a very big question. We have globally seen, on one hand, the Chinese model as a perhaps panacea. I worked in China for a while, and if you look at it closely, where you try to monetize the land, or you try to kind of redistribute this, in a city-state like Singapore, with a kind of very extremely small and tight situation, and at the same time, a driven commitment on the part of the governments, Hong Kong before it came under the control in '99, the amount of monies which were invested were quite enormous, so that we can leave out. But the Chinese model of raising the slum and then redistributing the land has not panned out. When you go, it's a patchy solution, but certainly is a solution for Dharavi and others. People have tried. So that is out there, and it's a partial solution. But it may not be a solution in all instances, because no two cities are the same, no two slums are the same. So the geography of the urban settlements and agglomerations across the globe, and every city, if you look at it, in Latin America, we have a lot of informal settlements on the perimeter of the cities. So this monetizing model may not be an easy solution in that regard. The pressure on land is very different in these locations. But if you're in Dharavi, in Mumbai, it's a totally different game. So one size fits all may be not a kind of a straight answer into this. Certainly, what I touched on was a decision on the part of the formal authorities of investing or paying for the housing. Who pays for the housing? However you pay, over a long period of time, you work out fiscal policies. We do it constantly in the western part of the world. After the Second War, what the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation did, or all the financing which was done, countries were bankrupt. And still we managed to produce middle-class housing because the banks were given loan guarantees, and that carried through the mortgage guarantees, and housing was produced, and the GIs were come back and were willing to put their life on line. Banks said they were safe enough investment. Are slum dwellers safe enough investments for you? I think for Muhammad Yunus and others, whom I know well, yes, they are. How do you monetize on certain things? So again, this opens up other areas. So I would say it's very difficult to say very kind of in a one word that this is the solution, but sites and services which you touched on, certainly sites and no services also is a possibility too. What is the service? It was in 1972, we built the e-call house where we had an autonomous house where there are no services. We have come a long way from those days with solar panels, which are so much more efficient. We never had LEDs, how very little energy we need to use. So the actual requirements of individual families, we have come a long way, but we are not getting there. So, but sites and services certainly is or should be, because land is a resource in hands of the formal authorities or a developer. And that is what you leverage. We, as architects, planners, designers, understand how to leverage land, how to monetize it, how to design a good shopping mall, and who pays for what. We are happy to talk about that. Can't we talk about the same in the city? But that's all I would say. And it went off the rail for many reasons. And let's move to some other topics. But I've talked enough on that. Or if you want to follow through, I would be happy to.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Who is next? I think
Lakshman Bhai.
Lakshman Bhai. Unmute your mic. Lakshman, unmute.
Lakshman.
Yeah. Nice, I think, hearing you after a long time on a very academic program. Question I have is like this, very simple, that when we do this kind of research and a pilot project, what are the, say, results I think that we are looking for over the time? So are you planning to have any follow-up studies, number one? And number two is, I think, say, whatever, I think, say, experiments or the research or the technological and the social, I will say, attributes which you have tried to display there, how they will be carried forward, not for this kind of project, but different kind of projects, so the society at large gets benefited. Yeah? Because we know that urbanization is almost like an unreversible process. Whether we like it or not, we have to accept it. Yeah, right. So I think all the junks that they have created, okay, how I think they can best utilize it, or how I think you can, I think, to make use of it, and to what extent I think, say, it can be mass applied. Yeah.
You touched on a very important thing, Lakshman. To move a little further from just this notion of a pilot project, in the recent years, what we have tried to really bring forward is what I would call action research. So the action is more driven by and with the community. So whether there is an uptake or carry through, it is not just a post-mortem of a little display project. If it happens, it continues. How it will happen, this is what perhaps your children or the younger generation will follow through and see. That's how I'm looking at it, rather than say, oh, you did a project and then nobody looked after it and disappeared. Because if we have no buy-in or no carry forward, so in the urban agriculture project, oftentimes plants have died and people have moved on, or happens in life many a times. So no, that was the wrong idea. But if the two other neighbors have done it, should I follow it and take it through in this process? So I'm not trying to dodge that, but this is an important effort that I'm putting in most of the work that has gone into action research in many, many ways to make sure that it works there. Number two, what you say is quite special, and that is, how do you carry forward, or how do you replicate, in what place? The most important aspect, I would say, is I'm taking a step back and looking at key elements of city making urbanism, where we looked at infrastructure and services, how cities are made, who owns what, who manages what. So, and that is what the unequal distribution of it in the city or city making around the globe, that readjustment, how it takes place, will make our cities truer to better democracies or more egalitarian. Number two, the environmental stewardship of the cities and liability, which you talked about, the waste, which it's not only there. When we were fighting the Cold War, it's still not over, the amount of waste which we have deposited on the northern frontiers, the military establishment has established itself all across the north. And you should see the radioactive and other waste, the amount of mining waste which is piled, because north is seen only as a resource-rich place to be harvested by the south. So I can show you other examples of our waste also, which is present there. So this is what, it's a very important kind of equation. I'm not trying to pivot away from it, but like the infrastructure, the waste which we are generating, or our consumer lifestyle, where we are and what it is doing to our cities and to our own environment, needs to be seen from the urban point of view. Because cities, I think, are the source of this great power. And the way I see it is, cities are the greatest creation of the humanity. What I see is, if cities can create wealth, if cities can create knowledge, if cities can create employment, if cities can create communities and great universities and great commerce, why can't they also produce more energy than they need? Why can't they recycle the waste, more waste than they produce? Why can't they produce more food than what they consume? That is the challenge. Not just bringing services and check, but using them efficiently, putting greater challenges to the cities and communities that we imagine. This is what are these experiments trying to kind of push forward. So I spoke in.
Thank you, Vikram bhai. It was a real delight to hear you talk. And you don't know me, but I have followed you and your work for a long time. It was after the masters that really caught my attention, because it was in, I believe it was 91, right after the masters. And it was around the time I was contemplating architecture school. So I have you to blame for my career choices.
I damaged, oh God, my apologies.
But I remember it, the book left a real impression on me, and I enjoyed it a lot. So I wanted just some thoughts on what, your collaborations with both Witold Rybczynski, which I know is not the author of the book, but you've done work with Rybczynski. And then also your collaborations with Peter Schreiber. And I guess the foundational underpinnings for, the germs for that book, how you went about that book. So that's one part of my question. And then the other side is, I really enjoyed the project you presented, but I couldn't help ask myself, why did it sort of get dismantled, from what I understand, in the few years afterwards? And across the board, a lot of academic thinking is now into what is called urban mining, right? This idea that you can use, you can actually find a good way of using urban waste, but may not even think of it as waste. by actually thinking of the city as a site for materials. And so what do you think of this? I think this becomes a kind of microcosm for an experiment like this. This is what I liked so much about the project. But what are your thoughts on the capacity of this project to actually not ever become waste, but almost think of it as a way of creating another means of building almost?
There are several questions. I will move through quickly. After the master's, it was time when I was working with, we were building up Vasudhara Foundation. We were based in Ahmedabad at that time. And at that moment in time, in the global discourse of postmodernism, modernism, there was very little attention being paid to what was being produced in the Greater South. China was still not on the horizon. But whatever work was being done in Africa, whatever work was being done in the Middle East, or part of it at least, and in South Asia, and was very exciting, I thought. As an early modernist, I felt that out of necessity, we were building it in a sort of modernist way. But it was, some of it was okay, some of it was just driven stylistically. So it had to be looked at closely. And it just so happened that I had taught Peter, and Peter had just finished his traveling scholarship, and he was passing through India on the last leg of his journey. And I said, Peter, I'm starting to work on this book. Would you be interested? So we joined hands. And so that was very fortuitous. And we very much enjoyed working together. And so, and it was at the same time extremely difficult to collect information about this. That's what we learned in the process. In those days, there was no pamphleteering, not as much. So therefore, that was really going from door to door. It's like pulling teeth. So please give me some pictures of your building. We will go and take pictures ourselves, but at least give us. But anyway, so that was a great part of the process. But certainly now there is tremendous interest in what was and is scholarly being followed around the globe. Now, how many doctoral candidates are working on the archives at the CCA, looking at work of Gropius, designing of the projects and the text work in Iraq, or Taxiadis' work in Pakistan, or I can just go on, all the work which was done by the Israeli government on whatever political or religious reasons in the African continent. So certainly there is a great wealth of architectural work which is being produced but not talked about. So that's what's important to do. And we were very fortunate to have done it when we did it. So, and Peter has done a very fine job, and they are continuing to do that work at the same time. So Vitold and I, we were both students of Alvaro. In that first image I showed, I am at the top, Vitold is in the middle, Alvaro is at the bottom. Alvaro initiated him, then immediately Vitold became director, and he initiated me, and it continues. We exchanged emails just this morning. So we continued working together for the longest time, but then he came closer to the issues of affordable housing in North America and in Montreal. So I continued to focus more on minimum cost aspect, both globally as well as locally. For middle class housing, the Affordable Homes Program was launched, which is doing quite well at McGill. And now we expanded and wrapped up those programs, which are looking at urban design and housing as a complete package. All the it certainly brings a kind of interdisciplinary view to these things. Vitold also is now emeritus. He moved to the United States, and he taught at Penn and continues to write. He's just finished a book. So that's that. So, and what was the third question?
I was just curious about why the project you showed was dismantled after a couple of years.
It has, you have an old sea can which is rusting, and you don't want splinters or rashes on things. So the new mayor comes and says, do we? So I well understand there is a finite life to this, or you have to continue to maintain. So there are the inherent challenges of that. So that's what I gathered from the previous two mayors. I haven't spoken with the new mayor in the recent time.
Does McGill, sorry to do this to you, but does McGill still have an interest in, I guess the CC archives for sure, but in terms of the program and the curriculum, does McGill still have an interest in the Global South?
I cannot speak for the new program at this moment. It's in the flux. So they really, we have a whole new group of hires in landscape, in at the same time related to urbanism. And there is tremendous interest in it, but how it will all happen, we will have to see. So I don't want to be commenting on that. Because we may have a change of, and just now we again in a very similar tradition have moved into like the minimum cost on the energy life cycle, material use, that entire, it's a, on the McDonald College campus, we will be building one of the most advanced labs where multidiscipline team is trying to look at the cycle from growing of the material resources to the energy inputs in the materials to the construction to the wood, especially in Canada and so on. So there is the similar things happening, but it will have certainly a global implication to the whole issue of. But I don't know how it will translate. But I'm continuing to work in, as you see, in a very modest way.
I think with a sort of time constraint, what we wanted to get other people's to ask questions.
Jinraj Bhai had a comment.
Okay, Jinraj, please.
Thanks, Arush.
We cannot hear you, Jinraj.
Unmute.
Okay. So Vikram has been bringing out very outstanding topic in Resorts of the Raj, in how the other half builds, and now this topic. He has been really bringing a wonderful work, particularly Resorts of the Raj. I have the book and all that. Please look at it. But on the other hand, he showed us something very interesting, is that mining industry, military, all kind of modern intervention has created not a home depot, but a dump depot of chemicals, pollutants, new materials, steel scrap, those motorized vehicles instead of those kayaks, which were sustainable, igloo housing, which were very, those 50,000 people in that area, they were living a wonderful lifestyle. And we, the intellectuals of all disciplines, go and poke our nose into something which is not required. The recent Pulitzer Prize was given to architects in France for doing nothing. And that is how it should be, because those people know how to live, living their own lifestyle. They don't need motorized transport. They don't need any of this material. We are introducing pollutants of different type into those environments. And this is not a Vikram is bringing out those points. It is all of us intellectuals that creating, because we think that they need to know calculus and higher education in order to hunt a fish. It's our problem.
Jinraj, okay, yeah, that's a very good point. What's the next question? I mean, if you have a question, Jinraj, or
No,
you had a comment, I understand.
Comment
Very good. Well, I think it's very, very thought-provoking comments, but I wanted to use the time to pick on Vikram's brain and Vikram's experience. So who's the next? Yeah, okay. Okay, Abhinay.
Can I go? Yeah. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation, Professor Bhatt. After a long time, I felt really hooked to a topic thanks to your narration skills, which flowed like a storytelling. And so the first question I wanted to ask was, um, green buildings are a new topic even now. Like clients are finding it difficult even to adopt it now. How were you received in the early 70s when you thought about green buildings? And the second question is in continuation with Mr. Jinraj. It always ends up disastrous when one tries to find a one fit all model, and that is what we've seen here. And do you have any future plans with the Inuit society in terms of projects? And how were you received when you reached out to them and proposed your projects in the past?
I had a good cover because I was teaching at Harvard of the North. So McGill was a very good armor. So certainly, I was also extremely fortunate having had opportunity to work with and learn from very important people. And when I was working in Doshi's office on those drawings which I mentioned, Satsangi to Desai to Kurla work here, I could have just continued and thrived on it, but I wanted to, but still when I came here, that I was fortunate enough to get accepted, but this taking a chance certainly helps. But when you're young, you do some crazy things. I have had challenges also when, how do you propose things? But you have to learn to see and present this not as something like a new sliced bread. That's why this is what I'm doing. This Tarchitect kind of way of looking. Most of my engagements have been very common sense, I think. What I'm saying is, should the residents living in poor housing not have proper toilets? It's not a, you talk to the mayor, you talk to the community organizers, you all have seen Slumdog Millionaire, and I know well Mr. Swaroop who wrote the book and so on, but and became a great movie, but we still have that problem. Bill Gates is putting millions of dollars. Still, we have not solved that problem. It is not that it is not a solvable problem, but it's going to require our concerted commitment to it. Similarly, in green things, if we want to say, your building will, what are the things you want to do in the public realm, in the city, or in the community design? What are the issues you have? The common sense approaches do provide some very important design intervention possibilities, I think. The point of entry has to be found, which is a much more common. Now, does it translate into greater liability and upfront expenses? Can you keep it down? This is where, and what is the liability you're building up? and how far you're gonna be willing to walk with it. On the campus of McGill, when I put forward the first garden, edible campus, instead of saying, okay, I don't want lawn on the campus of university, no. I say, this is a very sacred area. We will not touch. We don't touch a blade of grass. I will try to create a garden on mineralized surfaces, which are neglected spaces. Can I turn it around? And can I do it in a more reasonable way? I do it in a modest way, in containers and with the people and so on. And then the design challenge is there. And then taking it to the next step and saying, now, if I want to have things growing on these, I will not try to deface the building. I will try. So the design challenges are there, and the interventions are very modest sometimes. But because I am at the university in these places, people, and now I'm senior enough, I get away with lots of nonsense. I agree. But as a young designer too, you may have some very special, but don't try to copy. Think through. Try to digest through that really. And can you bring, it's not to dumb down things, but it is trying to find the common ground and say where you are going with this. This is so crucial.
Very good. Excellent. Yes. Is any other questions, or we open up for social times, or any other thoughts? Anybody?
Hi, Suresh. Nice to see you. Oh, Suresh was.
Where's Suresh? Oh, Suresh is.
Hi, Vikram. I've been listening to you on a different system.
Okay, so you're doing in a
Interesting.
camera.
There is one observation
Nice to see
about what Yuvraj said. I think he should not have studied at all. The problem is because he studied, he's asking all these questions.
Suresh, we cannot see you.
You'll be able to see me now.
Oh, now you can say, okay, yeah, I thought.
See, what you said is absolutely true. Okay. The only question is all the countries went into housing. What you said about Canada after the war, UK embarked on what is known as the New Town movement, and it was to honor those who fought in the World War II. So when they came back, they had something, and those were the period when a lot of invention took place. Most of the things which we enjoy now as the technology is a result of the war. War have been there from the time mankind came to this world. They were fighting with stones. We're fighting with different nature. It is a fact that we have to address that the resources are not fine. The biggest challenge is how to preserve the resources. We're going to run out of the resources. And that is the challenge all the designers, the town planners, the urban planners, everyone have to face. Luckily, it has been realized now, and many corporations have set up what is known as a sustainability department. They know that the shareholders are demanding now what are the actions your corporate body taking in to see that the business is sustainable. Now, that is the challenge for all of us. And you have been addressing the urban farming project. Okay? And urban farming in UK, the way it has been done, that many local communities have taken charge of their streets, islands, footpaths, and areas like that. At the same time, they have developed community gardens. Each housing association here, they have allocated allotments, it's known as an allotment. And that allotment has developed its own different community.
Suresh, can you turn off
Observation.
your we hear a lot of echoes. So can you turn off?
Yeah, that's done.
Done? Okay. But we couldn't hear you. There was a lot of echo.
I think, thank you, Vikram Bhai, for muting yourself. I think it was coming with because of those two things open up. Thank you, Vikram Bhai. Suresh Bhai, thank you.
Okay.
I agree with Suresh. The city delivered in the past, but we moved on. Now we're coming back again in the area of urban agriculture in a very big way. After the war, that is one thing, but during the war, we had victory gardens all over the West, and up to 40% of fresh produce was coming from cities, from within cities, and even greater quantities. In colder climates, we are still able to produce things now in very big way. Colleagues who work with me today are managing the biggest rooftop farms, which are put up by huge groceries chains on their own rooftop. So the delivery is just 3 meters down from the roof. So these are things happening as we speak. The biggest local producer has average 60,000 square feet, 100,000 square feet greenhouses on top of old factories, which are all converted. So they are absorbing energy and so on. So these are things happening as we speak in city of Montreal and everywhere around the globe. So in construction, we are the biggest producer of the waste of any other industry. So it is worth looking at how we design, what materials we use, how we move forward, and how we look at our palette of things. And it will take a while. That's all I could say. But I'm very positive in my view rather than negative.
Makes sense. Suresh Bhai, any further thoughts on that?
Yeah, what I was going to say that the building industry uses 40% of energy. We are part of that. Okay. What is surprising to me is that many of the design institute, they have not encompassed sustainability in the curriculum yet. See, you look at the curriculum from all over, from the different institutes, there will be hardly any topic on sustainability. I don't know, means I'm not in academic field, but Sarosh and Vikram and those who are in academic field, they should be able to brief us a little bit more on that.
Go ahead, Jindal Bhai.
So, Suresh, to answer the question, I teach a course on alternate energy and resource management, where we address the sustainability. And the students come from all branches of engineering, architecture, economics, environmental science, and all of that. So it's not all university have done it, but I created a course in 2008, and it was widely received. I even won a Walmart competition for making their 55 stores. Now you may challenge me that how can you have a 55 store in a small island of Walmart? It is not all Walmart. Walmart has bought a lot of subsidized stores which are under the umbrella of Walmart. They are known as Amigos and Econos and all that. So it is addressed, but whether it is addressed at the School of Architecture, that Vikram and Sarosh Anklesharia can address that.
Vikram bhai, Sarosh, if you may want to chime in. Otherwise, I would jump in as well.
As I mentioned, colleagues are working in a complete life cycle model in terms of materials, sourcing, growing, and the processing. So yes, it is being addressed. I'm not sure. It's being explored very rigorously, and not just on paper, physically, in action, from working on the forests to the complete methods of growing, to harvesting, to the process of buildings and fabricating and transport and the likes. So yes, it is starting to happen. It takes a while. You little older, you go through some of this thing. Most of us who are here, yeah. When I started doing these experiments on energy and autonomous buildings and so on, we wrote kind of codified these things, energy protection models and so on. The energy crisis was not on the horizon. That happened after the fact. We were trying to bring energy to people who were totally without energy. They didn't even have a light to go to toilet or read. So we are in a very different, but it is still continuing. And then it became very important. When I started showing energy conservation in buildings, the buildings which I showed you up north, they had zero insulation. The cost of energy was so low, nobody cared. Just pump some more residual fuel oil and we'll just heat up those anyway. So that's what was the attitude to it. We have come a very long way. And at the same time, when the energy crisis hit in '73, and then we started working on that, I didn't have a large enough classroom, launched the first, to put students in from the entire faculty of engineering and so on, people who come. And again, we have gone through signposts in this. So I would say the generational kind of disconnect in the process is gaining momentum. The cycles are becoming faster. So again, I remain very optimistic in this because I see the demands are coming from students, at least in the universities where I have been. The Sustainability Projects Fund is a great initiative of McGill. I will stop tutoring McGill after that, I promise. After colleagues and students and others saw the first edible campus right on the campus, and we were working with mobility impaired people, a volunteer organization which was growing food and taking it to the Meals on Wheels program from this harvested thing. We won the best urban design award for that. We won the urban design award for this project, which I showed you and so on. Students went to the university and said, we want to do more projects like this. University administration came and said, we want to do projects like that. How do you mobilize? Education in Canada is like the state university system. Students volunteered and said they will pay 50 cents levy on every credit they take. And they had a referendum and they approved. But they said we will only pay if the university matches. So university patrons and others say this was the right way to go. We have gone through multiple cycles of this. 3-year cycle, 3-year cycle. And the range of stuff students are doing just now. Now McGill's 200 years old. We had a complete competition, what they can do to reach out to do things. So the young generation is so engaged, in my experience, at least wherever I have been. So academia may be disconnected from us oldies, but the driving force is the new generation of students. So I think that's the most positive thing, which not only gives me hope, keeps me inspired, and I very much enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
If I may add a couple of things here.
Yeah, Suresh, I think very exciting ideas, and the practical way to do it is only Gujarati can do it, to figure out ways to monetize the new ideas. But I think we are kind of running out of our time. So
Yes.
And I wanted to kind of thank you again, Suresh, Vikram, and all the people, those who kind of came on and participated into a really thought-provoking and very interesting thing. So I think Vatsal is going to stop recording, and I think he can hang out. Whoever wants to kind of talk around and hang out, it's fine. I think Vatsal is available to it, and can unmute all your things, and you can talk. Vikram didn't touch on his time in early years in school. Should be kind of interesting ideas and his experience. So, so with that, I think I wanted to say thank you again, and thank you for participating. And we'll
thank you, Kirit. Thank you, Vatsal, for really helping me out in these things, because I'm here in a remote place with just an iPad and where to put this thing together, but it happened. So that's very nice. And it was so nice to see you all and to have your positive input. So
Vikram, it was a wonderful presentation, Vikram. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. But Vikram, if you can share, where you can sort of, I know that some of the books are on the Amazon, but otherwise, if there is not available, what places they can get or is available? Like particularly your early ones, after the Masters and the Hill Station.
After the Masters, I do not have any copies left. I just have a couple myself. But Resorts, I may still have some copies which I can make. But it's out of print.
Okay, good. So,
but this book, it's still available on Amazon. It's going quickly. It has had very positive reviews and so on. So we will see how it happens. I will check with ACTA on that because it's published in Spain and it's coming out. So we will see. But it's still available. They had a few copies for sure, but they may reorder it. I will have to find out.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Say hi to Kaumudi.
Oh, sure.